Radiator in my car clicked 3 times and went silent somewhere on I-94, and I remember thinking, good. At least something in my life is finally quiet. I didn't cry when my mother-in-law told me to leave. I didn't slam doors or throw things. I just stood in the hallway of the house I'd been living in for 4 years, holding a laundry basket with 2 pairs of jeans and a phone charger in it, and I nodded like she had just told me the weather. "You heard me," she said. "Danny's coming home from Portland. She needs a real space, not a pull-out couch, a real room. Your room." My room. I had been sleeping in the 2nd bedroom of her house since the divorce. That was the arrangement. Temporary, my ex-husband said when we split. "Just until you get back on your feet," he said. His mother had offered. She'd seemed kind about it. That was 14 months ago. The room had my grandmother's quilt on the bed. I had repainted the walls myself, a soft gray-green, the color of sage, because the original yellow gave me headaches. I had a small desk by the window where I worked every morning before anyone else woke up. That room had become the one square of the world I had made mine. My mother-in-law. I'll call her what my ex always called her mom, because that is still how she lives in my head. Stood in the doorway with her arms crossed and her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She wasn't yelling, she never yelled. That was the thing about her. She said devastating things in the same voice she used to read grocery lists. "You're almost 30, she said. "It's time." Time. Like I had been wasting it. Like I had been sitting in that room eating bonbons and watching television, instead of rebuilding a life that her son had helped dismantle. I said okay. I put the laundry basket in my car. I went back for my laptop bag and my work monitor and the box of files I kept under the bed. I took my grandmother's quilt off the mattress and folded it carefully. I left the sage green walls. I left the small white curtains I had hung. I left a coffee mug on the desk because I couldn't figure out how to fit it in anything and my hands were full, and I was not going to give her the satisfaction of watching me make a second trip. I drove to a motel on the edge of town. The radiator clicked, then it went quiet. I sat in the parking lot for 11 minutes before I went inside. What my mother-in-law did not know, what no one in that family knew, was that I had been a senior financial analyst at a regional firm when I married her son. They knew I worked in finance. They did not know what that meant exactly, because I had never made a point of explaining it, and my ex-husband, I think, preferred it vague. He was the one with the business degree. He was the one who talked about money at dinner. I was just his wife who worked on the laptop. What they did not know was that 2 years before the divorce, I had started consulting on the side. Just small contracts at first, then larger ones. By the time we split, I was pulling in more from consulting alone than from my full-time salary. I kept it separate. My own account, my own LLC, which I had incorporated in Delaware under a name that meant nothing to anyone who didn't know to look, Caldwell Advisory Group. I had never hidden it to deceive anyone. I had hidden it because I had learned, in that marriage, that anything that was mine had a way of becoming a conversation about what I owed. I set up my work monitor on the motel desk the first night. I had 3 client calls the next morning. I took them in my car in the parking lot because the motel walls were thin and the couple next door had a baby. I made coffee in the little in-room machine, and I worked through the afternoon, and I did not think about the sage green walls. I did not think about what my ex-husband would say when he found out his mother had done it. I just worked. Here is the part I have to explain, because otherwise what happened next doesn't make sense. My ex-husband's name is Bennett. We were married for 6 years. He is not a bad person in the way that movies make bad people. He never raised a hand to me. He was never cruel on purpose. He was capable of genuine warmth. But he had a mother who believed that the family unit operated on a hierarchy and that I had always been somewhere near the bottom of it. And he had spent 38 years learning that it was easier to agree with her than to argue. When she asked him to move back home after the divorce, to help with the house, she said, to save money, she said. He went, And when I needed a place to land, she offered the second bedroom, and I was grateful, and I told myself that whatever her reasons were, it was a kindness, and I should accept it as such. But there had been a mortgage. Bennett and I had bought a small house together during the marriage, a 2-bedroom bungalow in a quiet neighborhood about 12 minutes from his mother's place. When we separated, we could not agree on what to do with it. He wanted to sell quickly. I wanted to wait. The market was bad that spring, and I had run the numbers, and I knew we would lose money. We fought about it in the way that divorced people fight, which is to say through lawyers who charge by the hour and say very little. Eventually, we reached an agreement. I would buy out his share. I would refinance under my name alone. He would walk away with a check. What happened next was that his mother got involved. She called my lawyer directly, not me, my lawyer, and said that Bennett had reconsidered, that he wanted more than the agreed number, that the original agreement had been under duress. She used that word, duress, as if her 38-year-old son had been held at gunpoint when he signed. My lawyer was a woman named Hartley, and she had been doing family law for 22 years, and I could hear in her voice that she was not alarmed, only tired. "This happens," she told me. "We'll respond." We responded. Bennett's new demand was, legally speaking, not supportable, but it dragged on. Months of back and forth while I was living in the second bedroom of his mother's house, sleeping under my grandmother's quilt, repainted walls around me, eating breakfast in the same kitchen as the woman who was trying to renegotiate what I was owed. I had never said a word about the Caldwell Advisory Group, not to Bennett, not to his mother, not to my own lawyer. Beyond what was required for disclosure, I filed my taxes correctly, obviously. Everything was documented, but I'd structured things carefully and legally, and the picture that the family had of my finances, a single woman, recent divorce, modest salary, staying with the in-laws until she figures it out, was a picture I had not corrected. Bennett's mother knew I had a job. She did not know what I was worth. I found out about the fraud by accident. I had a client in commercial real estate, a good client, someone I had worked with for 3 years, and she called me in early March, which was 2 weeks after I had been asked to leave the second bedroom, and she said something that made my stomach drop. She said she'd received a credit inquiry. Someone had used her project address, which I had on file from our contract, as a reference address on the loan application. Someone had listed on that loan application a financial consultant associated with the property, and had listed that consultant's income as $240,000 a year. I was the consultant. I had never given anyone permission to use my name or my income on a loan application. I asked her to send me what she had. She sent it over that afternoon. I sat in my car in the motel parking lot, and I read through it twice. Bennett's mother had applied for a home equity loan. The house, the bungalow, which was still technically in dispute, had been listed as partial collateral, and on the application, where it asked about household income and assets, someone had filled in my name and a number that was not entirely wrong, but was presented in a context that was entirely false, that I was a cohabitant of the property, a contributing household earner, and that my income supported the loan. I was not a cohabitant of anything. I had not lived in that bungalow in over a year, and I had never, not once, agreed to be attached to any loan for any amount for any reason. I called Hartley. She was quiet for a moment after I finished explaining. Then she said, "Send me everything." Here is what happened over the next 3 weeks. While I sat in that motel and worked my client calls and made coffee in the little machine and did not, outwardly, appear to be doing anything at all, Hartley filed a complaint with the bank. The bank opened an investigation. A federal loan application with falsified co-borrower information is not a small thing. It touches wire fraud statutes. It touches bank fraud statutes. And when the collateral in question is a property still under legal dispute, it becomes something that people with federal authority take an interest in. I did not contact Bennett. I did not contact his mother. I went to work every morning. I took my calls. I reviewed my clients' portfolios and sent my invoices and made sure that Caldwell Advisory Group was running exactly as it had been running. clean and documented and above reproach. What I did do, because Hartley suggested it might be useful, was ensure that all of my financial documentation was current, consolidated, and accessible. Every contract, every 1099, every bank statement, every LLC filing, the full picture of what I was actually worth, laid out in order, in a folder that I kept on my encrypted drive. I also, and this part was Hartley's idea entirely, and I want to be clear about that, sent a letter to Bennett's mother. Through Hartley, formal and legal. The letter informed her that I was aware of the loan application, that I had not authorized my information to be used, and that I was prepared to provide documentation to that effect to any relevant authority. It offered her opportunity to withdraw the application voluntarily and to agree in writing to accelerate the resolution of the property dispute on the original terms. The letter did not threaten, it did not accuse, it simply laid out the facts and made an offer. She called her own lawyer. Her lawyer called Hartley. Hartley told me the conversation was, and I'm paraphrasing here, brief. They withdrew the loan application. They agreed to the original buyout terms, no new demands, no claims of duress. The number we had agreed on 14 months ago in writing was the number. I refinanced the bungalow in my name alone. It closed on a Thursday. I was in my car in a Panera parking lot when Hartley called to tell me, because the motel had started to feel smaller every week and I had taken to doing my calls in various parking lots around town just to feel like I was somewhere different. The woman in the car next to me was eating a salad and reading something on her phone. She had no idea that I had just become the sole owner of a 2-bedroom bungalow in a quiet neighborhood 12 minutes from a woman who had told me to pack my laundry basket and go. I did not call Bennett. I did not call his mother. I drove to the bungalow and I let myself in with the key I had kept on my keychain for 14 months, which no one had thought to ask for back, and I walked through the empty rooms. Someone had taken the light bulb out of the kitchen fixture. I don't know why. The rest of it was just empty, dusty. The carpet in the living room had an indentation where Bennett's couch had been. There were little squares on the wall where his pictures had hung. It smelled like old air and a candle someone had burned down to the wick. I stood in the second bedroom, the smaller one, the one with the window that faced the backyard, and I thought about the sage green walls at my mother-in-law's house. The curtains I had left. The coffee mug. Then I ordered a light bulb for the kitchen on my phone and I went back to the motel and I packed my things. I moved into the bungalow on a Saturday. I had the motel maid's cart blocked for 20 minutes by my monitor and my suitcase and my grandmother's quilt. And I apologized to her and she said, "Honey, it's fine." And that was the kindest anyone had been to me in a while. So I stood there for a second longer than necessary before I loaded my car and left. The house needed work. The bathroom faucet dripped. The backyard was overgrown. The carpet with the couch indentation eventually got pulled up because there was hardwood underneath which I had forgotten. I found it under there in late April, and I stood looking at it for a long time. This good floor that had been covered up. And I felt something that wasn't quite happiness but was close to it. I kept working. The consulting practice grew. I took on 2 new clients in June, a small manufacturing company and a non-profit that needed help with their endowment structure. I built a proper home office in the second bedroom with a real desk and good lighting and a monitor mount so I didn't hunch anymore. I heard about the bank investigation through Hartley. She called me in May to say that it had proceeded further than anticipated, that the authorities had found, in reviewing the application and the related documents, some other irregularities. She couldn't tell me details. She said I didn't need to do anything. I said okay. She said, "You handled this well," which was as close to a compliment as Hartley ever got, and I decided to take it. I don't know what happened to Bennett's mother, specifically. I know the investigation was real. I know she retained a criminal defense attorney, which I know because someone in our shared social orbit mentioned it at a thing I attended in July without knowing I was involved, in the same tone people use to relay neighborhood gossip. I said, and changed the subject. I know Bennett moved out of her house. Where he went, I couldn't say. I planted tomatoes in the backyard in late May, which is slightly late for tomatoes in this part of the country, but I figured I would try anyway. 3 of the 5 plants actually made it. By August, I had more tomatoes than I could eat, and I started leaving bags of them on my neighbor's porch, the older woman 2 doors down, who had waved at me when I moved in, and whose name, I learned eventually, was Georgia. Georgia made preserves and brought me a jar in September, and we stood on her porch for an hour talking about nothing in particular, and it was the most at home I had felt anywhere in a long time. I went back to my mother-in-law's house once, not to confront anyone. No one was there. I drove past it in October when the leaves were changing and the neighborhood looked softer than it had any right to. I slowed down a little. I looked at the front window, the one near the room that had been mine for 14 months. Someone had put a plant in the windowsill. It was a succulent, small and green and absolutely fine. I drove on. There's something people don't tell you about the version of revenge that happens through paperwork and Hartley's careful, billing-by-the-hour voice. It doesn't feel like revenge. It doesn't have a face or a moment. There's no scene where you get to watch the expression change. You just keep doing the work, and the days pass, and at some point you realize that your name is on the deed and theirs isn't, and your kitchen has a light bulb in it. And you grew 3 tomatoes from what was supposed to be 5, and your grandmother's quilt is on a bed in a house that is legally, entirely permanently yours. That's it. That's the whole story. The radiator in my car still clicks sometimes. I've had it looked at twice. The mechanic says there's nothing wrong with it, just the metal expanding and contracting with the temperature. Normal, he says. Just the car adjusting to the world around it. I told him that was fine. I could live with that. I think about the light bulb a lot. The one that was missing from the kitchen fixture when I first walked back into that bungalow alone. Someone had taken it, I still don't know why, and the room was just dark in the middle of the afternoon, and I stood there in that darkness and I thought, this is fixable. That was the whole thought. Not dramatic, not triumphant. Just, I can fix this. I ordered one on my phone and I went back the next morning and I screwed it in and the kitchen had light again. That's the thing, no one tells you about getting through something hard. It doesn't happen in a single moment. It happens in 100 small decisions that don't feel like strength at the time. It feels like just getting through the day. Ordering a light bulb, taking a client call from a parking lot, folding your grandmother's quilt one more time, and putting it in the car. What my mother-in-law saw when she looked at me was someone who needed her. Someone who had come out of a marriage with not much and was staying in her second bedroom and should, by her estimation, be grateful enough to leave quietly when asked. She wasn't entirely wrong about the leaving quietly part, but she had misread everything else. What I had in those 14 months was time. Time to document, time to build, time to make sure that Caldwell Advisory Group was solid and clean and structured in a way that could withstand scrutiny from any direction. I wasn't hiding because I was ashamed. I was being careful because I had learned inside that marriage what happened to things that were mine when I named them out loud in that house. They became negotiable. They became something owed. There's a version of the story where I confront her, where I say everything I thought in that hallway when she told me to pack my laundry basket. I used to play that version in my head sometimes, late at night in the motel, when the couple next door's baby was crying and the little coffee machine was dripping. It felt satisfying for about 30 seconds. Then it felt like nothing, because the house would still not be mine and I would still be in the motel. What I did instead was work. I kept my integrity intact. Every document filed correctly, every disclosure made, every contract clean. Not because I was afraid, but because I understood that your reputation is the only thing that can walk into a room before you do. When the bank investigator pulled my records, there was nothing to question. When Hartley laid out my financials, the picture was clear. The case for what I was owed made itself. That's what I mean when I say I think the choices we make under pressure reveal who we already are. Bennett's mother made her choices. She reached for something that wasn't hers, used a name she had no right to use, and built an argument on a foundation that couldn't hold weight. I made mine. I stayed quiet. I stayed honest. I kept building. The house is mine because I did the work to deserve it, and then had the patience to wait for it to become undeniable. The tomatoes grew because I put them in the ground and watered them and accepted that 3 out of 5 was still 3 more than I had before. Georgia brought me preserves because I left bags on her porch without expecting anything back. I don't know exactly what happened to my mother-in-law after the investigation. I know she hired a defense attorney. I know the application was withdrawn. I know that whatever shape her life has taken since then, she built it herself, the same way I built mine. The radiator still clicks sometimes. I've decided I don't mind.